Sometimes the cruelest moments in life become the greatest blessings in disguise. Ronan had been through enough hardship as a single father to know when people were laughing at him, not with him. His coworkers set him up on a blind date as a joke, pairing him with Tamsin, a woman in a wheelchair they thought would complete their cruel prank. But when Ronan sat down across from her, something unexpected happened. He saw kindness in her eyes, heard wisdom in her words, and felt a connection he hadn't experienced in years. What nobody knew was that Tamsin carried a secret worth billions. Would this night meant for mockery turn into something neither of them saw coming? Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow brings something special. 3 days before that fateful evening, Ronan woke to the sound of his daughter's laughter drifting through the thin walls of their apartment. It was Tuesday morning, and Bridget was already awake, her 8-year-old energy filling their modest 2-bedroom, with a lightness that made the peeling paint and worn carpet seem less important. He pulled himself from bed, his back aching from yesterday's work at the construction site. At 47, his body reminded him daily that he wasn't 20 anymore. The mirror showed a face weathered by sun and struggle, lines around his eyes that came from squinting at blueprints and worrying about bills. Grey, threading through hair that had once been solid brown. "Morning, Dad." Bridget bounced into the bathroom doorway, already dressed in her school uniform. She'd learned to get herself ready in the mornings, a skill born from necessity when Ronan worked the early shift. "Morning, sweetheart." He smiled at her, that genuine warmth that came so easily despite everything else being hard. "You eat yet?" "Made myself cereal. The good kind, not the healthy stuff." He laughed, splashing water on his face. "That's my girl, negotiating breakfast at 8 years old." Their morning routine was practiced, comfortable. He packed her lunch while she gathered her homework, their small kitchen barely big enough for both of them to move around. The refrigerator hummed loudly, a sound he'd grown so used to he barely noticed anymore. A child's drawing hung on the door, held by alphabet magnets. Bridget's depiction of their family, 2 stick figures, one tall and one small, holding hands under a smiling sun. There used to be 3 figures in her drawings. Ronan pushed that thought away, as he always did, focusing instead on cutting an apple into slices, adding crackers and a sandwich to her lunchbox. Not fancy, but made with care. He tucked in a note on a torn piece of paper. "You're amazing. Love, Dad." He did this every day, had since her mother died 4 years ago. Some mornings, it felt like the only thing he was doing right. "Mrs. Patterson says we're doing a project on families," Bridget said, swinging her legs from the kitchen chair. "We have to bring in photos. We've got plenty of those." He kept his voice steady. "Want to pick some out tonight?" "Okay." She paused, her young face suddenly serious. "Can I bring ones with Mom?" His chest tightened, but he smiled. "Of course you can." She'd want to be there. The walk to the bus stop took 10 minutes. Ronan carried her backpack, listening as she chatted about her best friend's birthday party this weekend. About the science test she wasn't worried about because she'd studied. About the new music teacher who let them pick songs sometimes. He absorbed every word, filing them away. These conversations were treasures, proof that despite losing her mother, despite living in a cramped apartment, despite wearing clothes from the thrift store, Bridget was happy. After she climbed onto the bus, waving from a window seat, Ronan walked 3 blocks to where his truck sat parked. It was a 15-year-old Ford with rust along the wheel wells and an engine that coughed before starting. But it ran, and that was what mattered. The construction site was 20 minutes across town. Ronan worked for Hillside Contractors, part of a crew that built commercial spaces, warehouses, retail centers, nothing glamorous. He'd been doing this for 12 years, ever since the factory where he'd worked closed down. The pay was decent when there was steady work, but steady wasn't guaranteed. "Look who finally showed up," Kyle called out as Ronan pulled on his work gloves. Kyle was younger, maybe 32, with the kind of swagger that came from never having experienced real hardship. "We were betting on whether you'd make it before lunch." "I'm 10 minutes early, Kyle." Ronan kept his tone neutral. He'd learned not to engage with Kyle's needling. Yeah, but with your luck, figured you'd have another crisis. Kyle grinned at Dennis, his usual audience. Flat tire, sick kid. Whatever excuse poor Ronan's got today. Dennis at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. Leave him alone, man. Ronan walked past them to the foreman's station, checking in for his assignment. The foreman, a gruff man named Pete, who'd been doing this for 30 years, handed him blueprints for the day's framing work. "Don't listen to those idiots," Pete muttered. "You're the most reliable man I got." Appreciated, Pete. The morning passed in the familiar rhythm of physical labor. Ronan liked the work, actually. The straightforward nature of it. Measure twice, cut once. Follow the plans. Problems had solutions you could see and touch. Not like the rest of life, where you did everything right and still ended up drowning. At lunch, he sat apart from the main group, eating the sandwich he'd packed. His phone buzzed with a text from his brother Connor. "Still on for Friday? The guys really want to meet you." Ronan stared at the message, remembering. Connor had been pestering him for months about dating again. "You can't stay alone forever," his brother kept saying. "Bridget needs to see you happy." Last week, Connor had finally worn him down. "Just one blind date. Friend of a friend. No pressure, just dinner. What's the worst that could happen?" Ronan had agreed mostly to stop the nagging. He'd typed back, "Yeah, Friday, 7 o'clock. Now, sitting on a stack of lumber with sawdust in his hair, he wondered what he'd gotten himself into. The truth was, he hadn't been on a date since before he married Sarah. That was over 15 years ago. He didn't know how to do this anymore. Didn't know if he even wanted to, but there was a small part of him, a part he barely acknowledged, that was tired of being alone. Not lonely, exactly. He had Bridget, had his brother's family, had work acquaintances. But at night, after his daughter fell asleep and the apartment grew quiet, he felt the absence of someone to share the weight with. "Hey, Ronan!" Kyle's voice cut through his thoughts. "You hear me?" He'd looked up to see Kyle and Dennis approaching, both grinning in a way that made him wary. "We were just talking," Kyle said, sitting down uninvited. "You ever think about getting back out there?" Dating scene. Ronan's guard went up immediately. "Not really. See, that's what I told Dennis. I said, Ronan's probably too busy being super dad to think about women." Kyle's tone was mocking, disguised as friendly. "But here's the thing. Connor mentioned you got a date Friday." Ronan's jaw tightened. His brother and Kyle's girlfriend were coworkers. Of course word had spread. "Yeah, so?" "So nothing, man." "Good for you." Kyle exchanged a glance with Dennis that Ronan couldn't read. "Just saying, must be nerve-wracking. Getting back out there after so long. I'll manage." "Course you will. You're a catch, right?" Kyle stood, slapping Ronan's shoulder harder than necessary. "Friday night. Bellini's restaurant. 7 o'clock. Should be interesting." After they walked away, Ronan sat very still, that last comment replaying in his mind. How did Kyle know where and when? Connor wouldn't have shared those details. Something felt off, but he couldn't put his finger on what. The afternoon dragged. By the time Ronan clocked out at 5, his shoulders ached and his hands were raw despite the gloves. But he couldn't go home yet. His second job started at 6, warehouse work at a distribution center, stocking shelves and loading trucks until midnight. He called Bridget from the truck. "Hey, sweetheart. How was school?" "Good. We started the family project. Mrs. Patterson loved the photos." "That's great. You at Mrs. Landry's?" Their downstairs neighbor, an elderly widow, watched Bridget most evenings in exchange for Ronan, helping with her repairs and grocery shopping. "Yep. She's teaching me to play chess. You listen to her, okay? Be good. I'll be home late." "I know, Dad. Love you." "Love you too, kiddo." The warehouse job was mind-numbing but necessary. The construction work paid most of their bills, but medical debt from Sarah's cancer treatment still haunted them. $23,000 remaining, down from 60. He paid what he could every month, but it felt like swimming against a current that never stopped. At midnight, he drove home through empty streets, so tired his eyes burned. The apartment was dark and quiet. Mrs. Landry had left a note. "Bridget asleep by 9. She's a treasure. Tea tomorrow?" He smiled at her careful handwriting. The kindness of strangers, well, neighbors, had saved him more times than he could count. In Bridget's room, he found her curled under blankets decorated with stars, her breathing soft and even. He adjusted the covers, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "You're the reason I keep going." In his own room, Ronan sat on the edge of his bed, taking out his wallet. Behind his driver's license was a photo. Sarah on their wedding day, her smile bright and hopeful, her hand in his. She'd been 31 then, so full of life that it seemed impossible she'd be gone by 39. Friday, he whispered to the photo. "I'm going on a date. I know that sounds crazy, but Connor thinks it's time, and maybe he's right. Maybe I need to try." He tucked the photo away, turned off the light and lay back. Sleep came slowly, his mind already worrying about Friday, about what to wear, about whether he'd remember how to talk to a woman who wasn't his daughter or his neighbor or a co-worker's wife. He didn't know that across town, in a penthouse office overlooking the city, another person was having similar doubts about the exact same evening. The first few minutes were awkward in the way that all first dates are awkward. Ronan fumbled with his menu, knocked over the water glass, thankfully empty, and apologized 3 times before he'd even ordered. Tamsin found it endearing, this nervousness that meant he actually cared about making a good impression. "So," he said, after they'd both ordered, "Connor told me you work in consulting?" It was the cover story Fiona had suggested, vague enough to be true, specific enough to avoid immediate questions. "Something like that. They work in technology, helping companies design better products. That sounds interesting." His tone was genuine, not just polite. "What kind of products?" "Mostly things that make technology more accessible. Better interfaces, adaptive equipment, that sort of thing." She watched his reaction carefully, looking for the usual responses. Pity, performative inspiration, awkward over-enthusiasm. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully. "My daughter's teacher uses a wheelchair. She was telling me last month about how frustrating it is that half the educational software isn't designed with screen readers in mind. Makes her job twice as hard." Tamsin felt something relax in her chest. He talked about disability the way you'd talk about any other fact, present, relevant, but not defining. "That's exactly the problem I try to solve. Technology should work for everyone, not just the able-bodied majority." "Makes sense." He took a sip of water. "Your work must be satisfying then, knowing you're actually helping people." "It is." She paused, then decided to test him slightly. "The consulting pays well, too. I've been fortunate in that regard." She watched for the flicker, the subtle shift in expression that meant money had changed the equation. But Ronan just smiled. "Good for you." Not enough people get paid what they're worth. The food arrived, and the conversation flowed more easily. He told her about Bridget, his 8-year-old daughter who wanted to be a veterinarian one week and an astronaut the next. About working construction, the satisfaction of building something tangible. About his late wife, Sarah, and how grief had taught him that you could carry love and loss simultaneously. Tamsin shared carefully edited versions of her own stories. The accident 5 years ago that had changed everything. Gerald, her fiancé, who'd been driving. Our work had saved her by giving her purpose when everything else felt meaningless. "I'm sorry," Ronan said quietly. "Losing someone you love, it leaves a mark that doesn't fade." "No, it doesn't." She met his eyes. "But I think that's okay. The mark means they mattered." "Yeah." His voice was thick with understanding. "Yeah, exactly." They talked about books, both preferred mysteries and movies. He admitted to crying at the end of children's films, which made her laugh. They discussed the city, the best parks, the worst traffic patterns. Normal things, easy things, the kind of conversation that felt like trying on comfortable clothes. An hour passed, then another. The restaurant filled and emptied around them, but neither noticed. Ronan had forgotten his nervousness. Tamsin had forgotten to maintain her CEO composure. They were just 2 people talking. Then Tamsin noticed movement across the restaurant. 2 men at the bar, watching them. One of them, younger with a smirk that made her uneasy, nudged his companion and gestured in their direction. "Do you know those men?" she asked quietly. Ronan turned, and his expression changed instantly. The warmth drained from his face, replaced by something harder. "Yeah, they're from my work crew. The two men were approaching now, drinks in hand, their body language screaming trouble. Ronan, the younger one, Kyle Tamsin would learn later, clapped Ronan on the shoulder. "Didn't expect you to actually show up, Kyle." Ronan's voice was flat. "Dennis, we're kind of in the middle of dinner." "Oh, we can see that." Kyle's eyes slid to Tamsin, and she felt the assessment, the judgment. "Having a good time?" "We were. That's great, man. Really great." Kyle's grin widened. "Hey, Dennis and I were just saying how nice it is that you're finally getting back out there. Really brave of you, you know? Taking our suggestion and everything." Something cold settled in Tamsin's stomach. "Your suggestion? Oh, didn't he tell you?" Kyle leaned against their table, completely inappropriate, invading their space. "This whole thing was our idea. Well, kind of a joke, really. We set up the profiles, arranged the whole date. Figured Ronan here needed a confidence boost." Ronan had gone very still. "Kyle, stop talking. Why?" "It worked out, didn't it? You're here, she's here." Kyle looked at Tamsin directly now, and there was cruelty in his expression. "We thought it'd be funny, you know, pairing up the broke single dad with the disabled chick. No offense, but neither of you exactly has options, right? Figured you might as well get out." Ronan stood so fast his chair scraped loudly. "Now, hey, no need to get upset. We did you a favor. You set me up as a joke." Ronan's voice was dangerously quiet. "You thought this would be funny." Dennis, looking uncomfortable, tugged Kyle's arm. "Come on, man. Let's go." Kyle shrugged, still grinning. "Whatever. Enjoy your pity date, Ronan." They walked away, laughing between themselves. The entire exchange had taken maybe 2 minutes, but it felt like the floor had opened beneath the table. Ronan sat back down slowly, his face flushed with shame and anger. "Tamsin, I didn't know. I swear to God I had no idea they set this up as some kind of—" He couldn't finish the sentence. She studied him carefully. The mortification in his expression was real. So was the fury directed at himself as much as at Kyle. "You really didn't know?" "No. Connor told me he knew someone who might be interested in meeting me. I thought it was legitimate." His hands were shaking slightly. "I am so sorry. I can't even— Do you want to leave?" Her voice was calmer than she felt. "I think I should. This whole thing is tainted now. They meant for us to be humiliated." He reached for his wallet. "Let me pay for dinner, at least." "Ronan." She put her hand on his arm, stopping him. "Did you know or didn't you?" He looked at her directly, and she saw the honesty there. "I didn't know. I would never— People aren't jokes." "You're not a joke." She believed him. "The question was what to do with that belief. There's a coffee shop 2 blocks from here," she said. "It's supposed to be good. What if we went there instead?" He blinked, surprised. "You want to continue?" "Those men wanted us to be humiliated, wanted us to feel like we were charity cases for each other." She felt anger rising, clean and sharp. "I refused to give them that satisfaction." A slow smile crossed Ronan's face. "You're something else, you know that?" "I've been told." She signaled for the waiter. "My treat tonight, non-negotiable." Outside the restaurant they walked in silence for half a block before Ronan spoke. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. Why did you agree to continue?" "Most people would have left." Tamsin considered the question. "Because in the hour before those idiots showed up, I had the best conversation I've had in 5 years. And I'm tired of letting other people's cruelty dictate my choices." "Fair enough." He paused. "For what it's worth, it was the best conversation I've had in 4 years." The coffee shop was small and warm, with mismatched chairs and local art on the walls. They ordered coffee for him, tea for her, and found a quiet corner. The conversation picked up where it had left off, but with a new layer of honesty. "I work 2 jobs," Ronan said. "Construction during the day, warehouse at night. I'm drowning in medical debt from my wife's cancer treatment. I live in a crappy apartment and drive a truck that's held together with rust and prayer." He met her eyes. "That's who I am." No pretense, no hidden success story. Just a guy trying to keep his head above water for his daughter's sake. Tamsin absorbed this, the complete vulnerability of it. "I lied about the consulting work." His eyebrows raised. "Oh? I own the company, Innovate Tech. Maybe you've heard of it?" Recognition dawned slowly. "The accessibility technology firm? The one that just landed the contract with 3 major phone manufacturers." "That's the one." He sat back, processing. So you're not just successful. You're very wealthy, yes. They looked at each other across the table, all the cards now on the table. Well, Ronan said finally. That's quite a gap. It is. Does it matter to you? She thought about it honestly. Only if it matters to you. He smiled, and it reached his eyes. Then I guess we're good. They stayed at the coffee shop until it closed, talking about everything and nothing. When they finally left, walking to where her car waited, there was an understanding between them. This was real, whatever this turned out to be. Tuesday evening found Ronan standing outside a building that looked like it belonged in architecture magazines. The lobby had marble floors and a doorman who'd eyed him with polite suspicion before checking the guest list. Now, in the elevator climbing to the top floor, Ronan was acutely aware of his worn jeans and the flowers he'd brought, grocery store bouquet that suddenly seemed inadequate. The elevator opened directly into her penthouse. Tamsin was waiting, dressed casually in slacks and a simple blouse, her expression warm and welcoming. "Hi," she said. "Come in. Those flowers are beautiful." "They're not really, but I appreciate the lie." He stepped inside, trying not to gawk at the space. Floor-to-ceiling windows, furniture that looked like art, a kitchen bigger than his entire apartment. "This is wow. It's too much space for one person," she admitted, taking the flowers. "But I like the view. Come on, dinner's almost ready." She'd made pasta, nothing fancy, she claimed, though it smelled incredible. They ate at a table by the windows, the city spread below them like scattered jewels. "Tell me about your day," she said. "Same as always. Framing, drywall, arguing with Kyle about proper measurements." He paused. "Actually, no. Kyle was worse than usual today. Made some comments about our date that I won't repeat." Her expression darkened. "What kind of comments?" "The kind that suggest he thinks I'm using you, or that you're using me. He's not creative enough to pick one narrative and stick with it. I'm sorry you have to deal with that." "It's fine. I've dealt with worse." But his jaw was tight, suggesting it bothered him more than he admitted. They finished dinner and moved to the living room, sitting on a couch that was probably worth more than his truck. The conversation flowed easily, about Bridget's latest obsession with space exploration, about Tamsin's new product line launching next month, about the small joys and frustrations of their different worlds. "Can I ask you something personal?" Ronan said, "Always. How did you end up here? I know you said you built the company, but this level of success this fast, that doesn't happen by accident." Tamsin considered how to explain. "After the accident, I became hyper-aware of how inaccessible the world is. Buildings without ramps, websites without proper coding for screen readers, technology designed by people who never considered disability in the design phase. I had money from the insurance settlement and Gerald's life insurance. So I hired 3 engineers and told them we were going to fix it. And you did. We did. Our first product was an adaptive keyboard for people with limited hand mobility. It was supposed to be niche, maybe break even. Instead, it went viral. Gamers started using it. Office workers who had carpal tunnel. Suddenly we had investors calling, and I realized we could scale this, make real change while building a profitable company. That's amazing, really. It was necessary," she corrected gently. "You know what nobody tells you about becoming wealthy? It doesn't fix the problems. I can afford any accommodation I need now, but I still get stares in restaurants. I still have to plan every trip around accessibility. I still have board members who question whether I'm fit to lead because they can't see past the chair." Ronan moved closer, taking her hand. "Their loss. You're the most capable person I've ever met. You're biased. Doesn't make it less true." They sat in comfortable silence, just being together. Eventually, Tamsin spoke again. "Ronan, we should talk about the practical things, the complications. Okay, if this continues, and I want it to continue, people will talk. Your coworkers already are. Soon it'll be others. My business associates, investors, maybe media if we're not careful. There will be assumptions about both of us. That I'm slumming, that you're gold digging, that this is some kind of charity situation. I know. Does that bother you? Because I need to know now if it'll be a problem." He thought about it carefully. "It bothers me that people are cruel. It bothers me that they can't just see two people who like each other. But does it bother me enough to walk away? No, not even close. Good. She squeezed his hand. Because I'm not walking away either. But I want you to know what you're getting into. Fancy parties and uncomfortable dinners with rich people. Exactly that. I can handle it. I might need coaching on which fork to use, but I can handle it. She laughed and the tension broke. They talked for another hour about everything and nothing until Ronan reluctantly checked his watch. I should go. I need to relieve Connor from babysitting duty. Bring Bridget next time, Tamsin said. I'd like to meet her properly. Yeah? Yeah, if you're comfortable with that. He stood, pulling her up with him. They were close now, closer than they'd been before. I'm comfortable with it. She's the most important person in my life. If you're going to be in my life too, you two should know each other. I'm going to be in your life, she said softly. For as long as you'll have me. He kissed her then, gentle and tentative, giving her room to pull away. Instead, she leaned in, her hand coming up to his cheek. The kiss deepened, and for a moment the world narrowed to just this, two people finding each other in the midst of complicated lives. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. So, Ronan said, his voice rough. Tuesday dinners are good. Very good, she agreed. After he left, Tamsin sat by the windows, watching the city lights and replaying the evening. She felt something she couldn't quite name. Hope, maybe, or possibility. Whatever it was, she wanted more of it. Meanwhile, Ronan drove home with a smile he couldn't suppress. Connor noticed immediately when he picked up Bridget. Good date. Really good. You like her. I really do. Connor studied his brother's face. Just be careful, okay? I know you're excited, but this is moving fast. And there's Bridget to think about. I am thinking about her. Tamsin wants to meet her. Properly, not just in passing. Already? Connor looked concerned. Ronan, you barely know this woman. I know enough. And I'm not introducing her as anything serious yet. Just someone I'm spending time with. Bridget's smart. She'll take her cues from me. All right. Just don't rush it. But Ronan was already planning it in his head. Saturday, maybe. Something low-key. The park where he and Tamsin had gotten ice cream. Let Bridget see them together in a natural setting. Let her form her own opinion. The rest of the week passed in a haze of anticipation. They texted constantly, called when they could. Tamsin sent Bridget a small gift, a book about women in STEM fields, with a note saying she'd heard Bridget was interested in space. When Ronan read the note to his daughter, Bridget's face lit up. She sent me a present? When do I get to meet her? Saturday. If you want to. I definitely want to. Saturday arrived sunny and warm. They met at the park, Tamsin arriving first and waiting near the playground. She was nervous in a way she hadn't been before. Meeting someone's child felt significant, weighted with implications about the future. Then she saw them approaching, Ronan holding Bridget's hand, and her nervousness transformed into something else. Bridget looked like her father, same warm smile, same open expression. Hi, Bridget said, stopping a polite distance away. I'm Bridget. Thank you for the book. I've already read 3 chapters. I'm so glad you liked it. Tamsin smiled at her. Your dad tells me you want to be an astronaut or a veterinarian. I haven't decided yet. Bridget tilted her head, studying Tamsin with a child's directness. Dad says you make computers better for people. That's cool. I try to. Maybe I could show you sometime if you're interested. Really? That would be awesome. They spent the afternoon together, getting ice cream, walking through the park, feeding ducks by the pond. Bridget chatted constantly, asking questions about everything, and Tamsin answered each one thoughtfully. Ronan watched them interact, feeling something settle in his chest. This could work. This could really work. As they walked back to the parking lot, Bridget suddenly took Tamsin's hand. I like you, she announced. You're nice. Tamsin's throat tightened. I like you too, Bridget. Very much. After they said goodbye, Bridget turned to Ronan with serious eyes. She's really nice, Dad. Can we see her again? I think we can arrange that. Good. Bridget skipped ahead toward the truck, then called back. I think Mom would have liked her too. Ronan felt tears prick his eyes. Yeah, sweetheart. I think she would have. 2 months into their relationship, The rhythms of their lives began to intertwine in ways both beautiful and complicated. Ronan saw Tamsin 3 evenings a week when his schedule allowed, which meant coordinating around construction shifts and warehouse hours, and Bridget's bedtime. Tamsin adjusted her own schedule, leaving board meetings early or declining evening events, prioritizing these evenings above business dinners that had once defined her social calendar. They established routines. Tuesday nights were dinner at Tamsin's place. She'd learned to cook simple meals, finding unexpected joy in preparing food for people she cared about. Thursdays, if Ronan wasn't working his warehouse shift, they'd meet for coffee after Bridget's bedtime. Saturdays belonged to all 3 of them. Park visits, museums, once a trip to an aquarium, where Bridget pressed her nose against the glass and declared she might want to be a marine biologist instead of an astronaut. But with the growing intimacy came growing complications. At work, Kyle's comments had escalated from snide remarks to outright hostility. He'd started calling Ronan the charity case and making jokes about wheelchairs that were designed to provoke. Other co-workers defended Ronan, which only created more tension on the job site. One Thursday afternoon, it came to a head. Ronan was measuring lumber when Kyle walked past and knocked his tape measure out of his hand. "Oops, guess I'm as clumsy as your girlfriend." Ronan straightened slowly. "Walk away, Kyle, or what? You gonna run to your sugar mama?" "Oh wait, she can't run." Ronan's fist connected with Kyle's jaw before he fully registered the decision to swing. Kyle stumbled back, and for a moment the entire work site went silent. Then Kyle lunged forward, and they were grappling, other workers rushing to pull them apart. Pete the foreman appeared, his face red with fury. "Both of you, my office, now." In the cramped construction trailer, Pete looked between them with disappointment that hurt worse than Kyle's cheap shots. "I don't care who started it or why. Fighting on a job site means both of you are suspended. 3 days, no pay. And if it happens again, you're both fired." Kyle left, still smirking, but Ronan felt only shame. 3 days without pay meant falling further behind on bills, meant disappointing Pete, meant having to explain to Bridget why Dad was home during work hours. He called Tamsin from the parking lot, his knuckles still aching. "I messed up. What happened?" He told her everything, the escalating harassment, the final comment, his loss of control. When he finished, there was silence on the line. "I'm sorry," Tamsin said finally. "This is because of me. Because people are talking about us. It's because Kyle's a bully who found a target. This isn't on you, isn't it?" "Ronan, I've been thinking about this. The attention we're getting, the assumptions people are making. Maybe we should—" She paused, choosing words carefully. "Maybe we should keep things more private for a while. Not hide exactly, but not flaunt it either." Something cold settled in his chest. "You mean hide it? That's not what I said. That's what it sounds like. Like you're embarrassed." "I'm not embarrassed." Her voice tightened with frustration. "I'm worried about you. About your job, your stability, Bridget's security. If taking a step back in public would help, taking a step back means letting them win. Means agreeing that we're something to be ashamed of. That's not fair, isn't it?" He knew he was being unreasonable but couldn't stop. "You're the one suggesting we hide. I'm the one who just lost 3 days' pay defending your honor." The words hung between them, harsh and wounding. Tamsin's voice went quiet. "I didn't ask you to do that. I know. I'm sorry. He rubbed his face with his free hand. "I need to go. I need to think. Ronan, I'll call you later." He hung up and sat in his truck, anger and shame and fear mixing into something that made his chest tight. He'd screwed up at work. He'd lashed out at Tamsin. He was drowning, and he didn't know how to ask for help without looking weak. That evening, after explaining the suspension to Bridget in terms that emphasized consequences for poor choices, Ronan called his brother. "I think I'm ruining this," he admitted. "With Tamsin. I'm letting pride and stress make me stupid." "What happened?" He explained the fight, the suspension, the argument with Tamsin. Connor listened without interrupting, which Ronan appreciated. When he finished, Connor was quiet for a moment. "You're scared," Connor said finally. "What?" "You're scared this is too good to last. Scared you'll lose it like you lost Sarah, so you're sabotaging it before it can hurt worse." Connor's voice was gentle but firm. "I've watched you do this for 4 years. Anytime something good happens, you find a way to prove you don't deserve it." The words hit like a physical blow. "That's not... It is, though. You work yourself to death because you think suffering is the only way to earn security. You push people away when they offer help because accepting it means admitting you can't do everything alone. And now you've found someone who sees you as more than just a struggling single dad, and you're terrified." Ronan wanted to argue, but the truth in Connor's words was undeniable. "What do I do?" "Call her back. Apologize properly, and then do the hardest thing you've ever done. Let her in. Really in, all the way. The fear, the struggle, the parts you think make you unworthy. Let her see it all." Ronan called Tamsin an hour later, after he'd put Bridget to bed and had time to think. She answered on the first ring. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "You were trying to help, and I made it about my pride. That wasn't fair. I'm sorry too. I shouldn't have suggested hiding. You were right. That would be letting them win." They talked for 2 hours, really talked about fears and insecurities, and the ways their different worlds created friction neither had anticipated. By the end, they'd agreed to face the complications together rather than retreating into safety. "Come over tomorrow," Tamsin said. "I want to see you." "I'd like that." Friday evening, Ronan arrived at her penthouse with takeout, his contribution since he couldn't afford fancy restaurants right now. They ate on her couch, and for the first time, he told her everything. The full extent of his medical debt, the constant juggling of bills, the warehouse job he hated but couldn't quit, the fear that kept him awake at 3 in the morning, wondering what would happen to Bridget if he got sick or injured. Tamsin listened without interrupting, and when he finished, she took his hand. "I want to help," she said carefully. "Not because I think you can't handle it, but because I care about you, and I have resources I'm not using. Would you let me?" His instinct was to refuse, to insist he could manage. But Connor's words echoed in his mind. "Let her in." "What kind of help?" "I don't know yet. Maybe paying off the medical debt. Maybe helping with rent, so you can quit the warehouse job and actually sleep at night. We'd figure out terms that work for you. Something that doesn't feel like charity. I can't accept money from you. That changes everything, does it? Or does pride change everything?" Her voice was gentle but firm. "Ronan, you told me once that Sarah's death taught you that you could carry love and loss simultaneously, but you're still carrying everything else alone. At some point, partnership means letting someone share the weight." He closed his eyes, fighting against every instinct he had. "If I accept help from you, people will say I'm using you, that I'm with you for your money. People already say that. Are you going to let their opinions dictate our relationship?" "No." "Then let's make our own rules. What would make you comfortable?" They talked through options, eventually landing on a loan structure. Formal terms, reasonable interest, monthly payments he could actually manage. It felt better than a gift, gave him agency even while accepting help. "Can I think about it?" he asked. "Of course. Take all the time you need." Later, as they sat by the windows watching the city lights, Tamsin rested her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for letting me in," she said quietly. "Thank you for wanting in." The next few weeks tested them in different ways. At work, Kyle spread rumors about Ronan accepting money from his rich, crippled girlfriend. Words that made Ronan's blood boil, but that he forced himself to ignore. Other coworkers were supportive, but the job site had become uncomfortable in ways that wore on him. Meanwhile, Tamsin faced her own pressures. A major investor started questioning her judgment, suggesting that her personal life was affecting her professional focus. Board members whispered in corners. The business press began running pieces about her relationship. Some supportive but many skeptical about the optics of a billionaire CEO dating a construction worker. One evening, Fiona confronted Tamsin in her office. "The board is getting restless. They're saying your relationship is becoming a distraction. My company performance hasn't suffered. I know that. But perception matters in business. They're worried about image, about what investors think. Let them worry." Tamsin's voice was steel. I'm not ending a relationship because it makes old men in suits uncomfortable. I'm not suggesting you should. I'm just warning you that there might be consequences. After Fiona left, Tamsin sat in her office and wondered if she was being selfish. Her company employed 300 people. If her relationship jeopardized that, wasn't she putting personal happiness above professional responsibility? She called Ronan that night. "Do you ever think we're making things harder than they need to be?" "Every day," he admitted. "But then I remember how I feel when I'm with you, and I think it's worth it. What if my relationship with you costs me my company? Would it?" "Maybe. The board is restless. Investors are questioning my judgment." He was quiet for a moment. "If you lost the company, would you blame me?" "No, never. Then we keep going. We face whatever comes together." His certainty steadied her. They'd chosen this path, knowing it would be difficult. The question was whether they were strong enough to walk it together. 3 months into their relationship, Tamsin invited Ronan to a charity gala her company was sponsoring. It was the kind of event she usually attended alone, maintaining professional distance from everyone around her. But she wanted him there, wanted to stop compartmentalizing her life into work Tamsin and real Tamsin. "I need to warn you," she said when extending the invitation. "It's going to be uncomfortable. Formal wear, small talk with people who measure worth in investment portfolios, lots of judgment disguised as curiosity." "Sounds delightful," he said dryly. "When is it?" "Next Saturday. And before you worry about the tuxedo rental, I have a tailor who can—" "No." His voice was firm. "I'll rent my own tux. I can afford that much." She recognized the pride in his refusal and didn't push. "Okay, I'll send you the details." The week leading up to the gala, Ronan felt his anxiety building. He'd looked up the venue online, a hotel ballroom that probably cost more to rent for one night than he made in 6 months. The guest list included local politicians, business executives, and the kind of old money that never had to think about money. Connor helped him rent a tuxedo, adjusting the bow tie in his brother's bathroom mirror while offering unwanted advice. "Just remember, you're as good as any of them. Better, probably, because you actually work for a living. Thanks for the pep talk. I'm serious. Don't let them make you feel small." But when Saturday arrived and Ronan stood in that ballroom, Connor's words felt hollow. The room was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, servers in black tie carrying champagne on silver trays. Everyone seemed to know everyone else, moving through the space with the ease of people who belonged. Tamsin found him near the entrance, and his breath caught. She wore a midnight blue gown that somehow made the wheelchair look elegant rather than medical, her hair styled in a way he'd never seen before. She looked like she belonged in this world, confident, poised, every inch the successful CEO. "Hi," she said, wheeling up to him. "You look handsome. You look incredible." He bent to kiss her cheek, aware of eyes tracking the movement. "Should I brace myself?" "Probably." "Come on, I'll introduce you around." The next 2 hours were a masterclass in social discomfort. Tamsin introduced him to investor after investor, business partner after executive, and each conversation followed the same pattern. Polite interest, subtle questions about what he did for a living, expressions that tried to hide surprise or disdain when he mentioned construction work. "And how did you two meet?" an older woman asked, her tone suggesting she already knew the answer would be amusing. "Blind date," Tamsin said smoothly. "Turned out we had a lot in common." "How lovely." The woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. "It's so important to find connection where you can." After she walked away, Ronan leaned down to whisper, "Did she just imply we're both settling?" She absolutely did. "Welcome to my world." But worse than the subtle condescension was overhearing a conversation near the bar. Ronan had stepped away to get drinks when he heard his name. "Dating that construction worker. I know we're supposed to pretend it's romantic, but honestly it shows poor judgment. You think he's after her money. What else could it be? She's brilliant and successful, sure, but she's also in a wheelchair. How many options does she really have? And he's broke with a kid. It's mutually beneficial, I suppose." Ronan's hands tightened on the glasses he was holding. He wanted to turn around, to confront them, to defend both Tamsin and himself. Instead, he took a breath and walked back to where Tamsin was talking with a city councilman. She saw his expression immediately. "What's wrong?" "Later, I'm fine." But she knew him well enough now to read the tension in his jaw, the forced casualness of his posture. When the councilman excused himself, she turned to Ronan fully. "Tell me." He did, quietly, trying to keep emotion out of it. Her face went very still. "Who said it?" "Doesn't matter." "It matters to me. Tamsin, they're not wrong about the optics. I am broke with a kid. You are successful and wealthy. On paper, it looks exactly like they're saying. Do you care what it looks like on paper? I care that it affects you, that being with me gives people ammunition to question your judgment." She took his hand, there in the middle of the ballroom with hundreds of people watching. "My judgment is excellent. I chose you, didn't I?" He managed a smile, but the evening had lost its shine. They stayed another hour. Tamsin had to, it was her event. But both were relieved when they could finally leave. In the car, Tamsin's driver took them back to her penthouse. They rode in silence, the weight of the evening pressing down. "I hate this," Ronan said finally. "I hate that being with me makes your life harder. Being with you makes my life better. Everything else is just noise. Expensive noise. You heard them tonight? They think your judgment is compromised. What if they're right? What if I'm a distraction from what matters?" "You matter," she said fiercely. "More than any of them. More than the company even. Don't say that. Your company is your legacy. And what? I'm supposed to sacrifice personal happiness for a legacy? Build something incredible while being completely alone?" She shook her head. "That's not living, Ronan. That's just existing with better furniture." Back at her place, they sat by the windows and tried to decompress. Ronan still felt the sting of those overheard comments, the sense that he was somehow failing her just by being himself. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "Your world is so different from mine. Those people tonight, I had nothing to say to them. Nothing in common. I felt like a fraud in that tuxedo." "You weren't a fraud." "You were you. That should be enough." "Should be. But is it?" She moved closer, taking his face in her hands. "Listen to me. I've spent 5 years in rooms full of people who measure success in stock prices and acquisition deals. I've been bored and lonely and wondering if this is all there is. Then I met you. You make me laugh. You see me as a person, not a profit margin. You make me want to be better while accepting me exactly as I am. That's worth more than fitting in at 100 galas." He kissed her then, pouring all his frustration and fear and love into it. When they broke apart, both were breathless. "I love you," he said, the words surprising him even as he said them. "I don't know when it happened, but I do." "I'd love you too," she smiled, tears in her eyes. "Even when you're being stubborn and proud. Especially then." Especially then. They stayed up late, talking through fears and hopes and what the future might look like. By the time Ronan left, regretfully because he had to get home before Bridget woke, they'd recommitted to facing whatever came together. But the next week brought new challenges. A photo from the gala appeared in the society pages. Ronan and Tamsin together, her in her beautiful gown, him in his rented tux. The caption was neutral, but the online comments were brutal. "Gold digger, charity case. Poor judgment. Calculating woman taking advantage of lonely man." The comments hurt, but what hurt worse was the call Tamsin received from her board chairman on Wednesday morning. "We need to talk about your personal life. It's becoming a liability to the company. My personal life is not the board's concern. It is when it affects shareholder confidence." "We're getting questions, Tamsin. Investors are worried your focus is divided." "My focus is fine. Company performance is up 15% this quarter. That's not the point. Perception matters. And right now, the perception is that you're making decisions based on emotion rather than logic." After she hung up, Tamsin sat very still in her office, rage and fear warring inside her. She'd built this company from nothing. It was hers, and now they were using her relationship as a weapon against her. She called Ronan that evening, voice tight with controlled fury. "The board is questioning my leadership. Because of us. What does that mean?" It means they're watching me, looking for any excuse to suggest I'm not fit to lead. She paused. Ronan, this could get ugly. If they decide to push it, there could be consequences for both of us. Then we face them together, he said quietly. Like we always do. But even as he said the words, Ronan felt the weight of what was coming. They'd chosen each other, but that choice was about to be tested in ways neither had anticipated. 3 weeks after the gala, Ronan was on the construction site when his phone rang. The school's number flashed on the screen, and his heart immediately dropped. Schools only called during work hours when something was wrong. Mr. Garrett, this is Principal Stevens. Bridget collapsed during gym class. The ambulance is taking her to Memorial Hospital. You should come right away. The words hit him like a physical blow. He was in his truck before Pete could even ask what was wrong, tires screeching as he pulled out of the lot. His hands shook on the steering wheel. Not Bridget. Please, not Bridget. He couldn't lose her too. The emergency room was chaos. Doctors, nurses, machines beeping urgently. They'd taken Bridget straight into examination, wouldn't let him follow. A nurse explained that they suspected appendicitis, needed to run tests, prepare for possible surgery. Surgery? His voice cracked. Is she going to be okay? The doctor will explain everything. Just try to stay calm, but calm was impossible. He sat in the waiting room, head in his hands, trying to remember how to breathe. He called Connor, left a voicemail. Called Tamsin next. Ronan, what's wrong? He could barely get the words out. Bridget, hospital, they think appendicitis. I can't. Which hospital? Memorial. I'm on my way. 20 minutes. She arrived in 15, finding him pacing the hallway outside the examination area. The moment he saw her, something in him broke. She opened her arms, and he folded into them, this strong man who'd been holding it together for years, finally letting someone else carry part of the weight. She's all I have, he whispered. If something happens to her, nothing's going to happen. She's young and strong, and they caught it early. She's going to be fine. A doctor appeared, introducing himself as Dr. Walsh. Mr. Garrett, it is appendicitis. We need to operate within the hour. It's a routine procedure, but there are always risks we need to discuss. The doctor went through the consent forms, the risks, the recovery timeline. Ronan signed everything with numb fingers, barely processing the words. They let him see Bridget briefly before surgery. She was scared, but trying to be brave, and that broke his heart more than anything. Dad, it hurts. I know, baby. But the doctors are going to fix it. You're going to be just fine. Promise? He kissed her forehead. Promise! They wheeled her away, and Ronan stood in the hallway feeling more helpless than he'd ever felt in his life. Tamsin took his hand, leading him back to the waiting area. Connor's on his way, she said. He got your message. They sat together, Tamsin's hand in his, while minutes crawled past. An hour, too. Connor arrived with his wife, bringing coffee nobody drank. Finally, Dr. Walsh reappeared. Surgery went perfectly. No complications. She'll be in recovery for another hour, then we'll move her to a room. You can see her then. Relief hit Ronan so hard he nearly fell. Thank you. Thank you so much. After the doctor left, a woman from the billing department appeared. Mr. Garrett, we need to discuss payment arrangements. He followed her to a small office, Connor and Tamsin waiting outside. The woman pulled up Bridget's file, and Ronan's stomach sank as she explained the costs. Surgery, anesthesia, overnight observation, medications, it added up to $47,000. His insurance would cover some, but he'd still owe $32,000. We can set up a payment plan, she said kindly. $600 a month for 5 years, $600 a month. On top of his existing debt, his rent, utilities, everything else. The math was impossible. He'd have to find a third job. Stop sleeping entirely, maybe. Okay, he heard himself say. Set it up. He walked back to the waiting room in a daze. Connor took one look at his face and knew. How bad? $32,000 after insurance, Connor swore softly. Tamsin went very still. Ronan, she started. Don't. He held up a hand. Please. Not now. They sat in tense silence until a nurse said they could see Bridget. She was groggy but awake, managing a weak smile when she saw them. Hi, Dad. Miss Tamsin. Hi, sweetheart. Ronan took her hand, forcing his voice steady. How do you feel? Sleepy and sore. That's normal. You're going to stay here tonight so they can make sure you're healing properly. Then we'll go home tomorrow. Connor and his wife stayed for another hour, then left with promises to check in tomorrow. Ronan settled into the chair beside Bridget's bed, planning to stay all night. Tamsin pulled another chair close. You don't have to stay, he said quietly. I'm staying. Around midnight, when Bridget was deeply asleep, Tamsin finally spoke. Let me pay for this. No. Ronan, you can't afford it. You know you can't. $600 a month on top of everything else. You'll work yourself to death. I'll manage. How? By never sleeping. By taking a third job. That's not managing, that's drowning. Her voice was urgent, almost pleading. I have the money. I can write a check tomorrow, and this whole thing disappears. Why won't you let me help? Because accepting that much money changes everything between us. It makes me dependent on you. It makes this, he gestured between them, into something transactional. That's ridiculous. Partners help each other. That's what partnership means. We've been together 3 months. 3 months, Tamsin. And you want to give me $30,000. How does that not change things? Because I love you. The words burst out of her, too loud for the hospital room. She lowered her voice. I love you, and I love Bridget, and I have resources I'm not using. Why is pride more important than practical reality? It's not pride. It's, he struggled to explain. If you loved me because I accepted your money, I could live with that. But if you love me despite me refusing it, that means something. That means you see me as an equal, not a project. You are my equal. The money doesn't change that, doesn't it? In every way that matters to the world, you're successful and I'm struggling. The only thing I have is my independence. If I give that up, what am I? They stared at each other, both frustrated, both scared. Finally, Tamsin spoke again. What if it's a loan? Formal terms, interest, everything legal and official. You pay me back over time, whatever timeline works for you. Would that preserve your precious independence? He considered it. A loan was different. Still accepting help, but with clear terms, with his dignity somewhat intact. I need to think about it. Ronan, I said I need to think. His voice was harder than he intended. Can we please just drop it for now? She backed off, but the tension remained. They spent the night in uncomfortable silence, both exhausted, both worried, both wondering if they'd just revealed a fracture that couldn't be repaired. The next morning, Bridget was discharged with medication and careful instructions. Ronan took a week off work, unpaid, to care for her. Tamsin wanted to help, to stay with them, but the tension from their hospital argument hung between them like smoke. I need some space, Ronan had said, not unkindly, to figure things out. She'd respected that, though it hurt. They texted, brief updates on Bridget's recovery, but the warmth was gone, replaced by careful politeness. By day 3, Ronan's apartment was suffocating him. Bills piled on the counter. The eviction notice he'd been avoiding sat under a stack of medical paperwork. He'd fallen behind on rent during the chaos, and the landlord had no patience for excuses. He sat at his kitchen table after Bridget went to bed, doing math that wouldn't work no matter how many times he tried. Rent, medical bills, food, utilities. The numbers didn't add up, they never added up. His phone buzzed. Tamsin. How is she? Better. Asking when she can go back to school. That's good. And you? He stared at the question, at the 3 letters that contained so much concern. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. I'm drowning. I can't do this alone anymore. The response came immediately. You don't have to. Let me help, please. He closed his eyes, pride warring with desperation. Finally, he typed, Can we talk? Tomorrow? Yes. Any time. The next evening, Connor stayed with Bridget while Ronan drove to Tamsin's penthouse. She opened the door before he could knock, her expression anxious. Hi. He stepped inside, and they stood awkwardly in her enormous living room. I'm sorry about the hospital, about being stubborn. I'm sorry for pushing. Watching you struggle when I could help, it kills me. He took a breath. I need the loan. All of it. $50,000 to cover the medical bills and back rent, and maybe buy myself some breathing room. But I need terms that let me keep my self-respect. Relief flooded her face. Okay, whatever terms you want. They sat together, working through the details. 5% interest, fair but not predatory. 10-year repayment, monthly payments he could actually manage. Everything would be documented, legal, formal. One more thing, he said. I pay you back every cent. If we break up, if something happens, the debt doesn't disappear. This is business, not charity. Understood. She pulled out her laptop, started drafting the agreement. My lawyer can formalize this tomorrow. Thank you. The words felt inadequate. I mean it. You're saving my life here. You'd do the same for me. In a heartbeat. The contract was drawn up within 2 days. Ronan read every line, signed with a hand that still trembled slightly. The money transferred, and suddenly his immediate crises were solved. He could breathe again, but the victory felt hollow. At work, Kyle somehow learned about the loan, probably through the gossip network that connected their lives, and the comments intensified. Hey Ronan, how's it feel being a kept man? Ronan ignored him, but the words burrowed under his skin. Other co-workers defended him, which only made Kyle worse. The job site had become toxic. Meanwhile, across town in a corporate boardroom, Tamsin faced her own battle. The investors had called an emergency meeting, and their intention was clear from the moment she wheeled into the conference room. We need to discuss your leadership, the lead investor began. Specifically, concerns about your judgment. My judgment has been excellent. Company performance is up, new product lines are exceeding projections. We're not talking about product performance. We're talking about personal decisions that reflect on the company. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were photos. Her and Ronan at the gala, leaving her building together. The society page articles. This relationship is becoming a liability. Tamsin felt rage rise, clean and cold. My personal life is not the board's concern. It is when it affects investor confidence. There's talk, Tamsin. Questions about whether you're making emotional decisions rather than logical ones. About whether this man is influencing your judgment. That's absurd, is it? You've been distracted, leaving meetings early, declining networking opportunities, and now we hear you've made substantial personal loans. It paints a picture. A picture. Of what exactly? Of someone whose personal entanglements are compromising her professional effectiveness. Fiona, sitting beside Tamsin, spoke up. The company's numbers don't support that narrative. Every metric shows strong performance. Numbers aren't everything. Perception matters. And right now, the perception is troubling. The investor leaned forward. We're calling for a vote of no confidence at next month's board meeting. Unless you can demonstrate that your personal situation isn't affecting your leadership, we'll be recommending your removal as CEO. The room went silent. Tamsin sat very still, processing the threat. They were trying to take her company, the company she'd built from nothing, that she'd poured her grief and passion into creating. Let me be clear, she said quietly. This company exists because of my vision, my leadership. My refusal to accept that accessible technology should be a niche market. You're welcome to call your vote, but I won't be stepping down, and I won't be ending my relationship to appease your outdated notions of propriety. Then we'll see you at the board meeting. After they left, Tamsin sat in her office, shaking with fury and fear. Fiona brought her tea, sat down across from her. They're serious. They have the votes if you don't give them something. I'm not giving up Ronan. I'm not suggesting you should, but you need a strategy. Tamsin stared out the window at the city below. Somewhere down there, Ronan was working on a construction site, probably dealing with his own harassment. They were both fighting battles because they'd chosen each other. The question was whether that choice would cost them everything. The board meeting was scheduled for Friday morning. Tamsin prepared meticulously. Financial reports, product performance data, every metric that proved her leadership was sound. But she knew the investors weren't really interested in numbers. This was about control, about punishing her for refusing to conform. Thursday evening, she called Ronan. "The board meeting is tomorrow. They're voting on whether to remove me as CEO. What?" His voice was sharp with alarm. "Can they do that?" "If they have enough votes, yes. They're claiming my personal life is affecting my judgment, meaning me. I'm affecting your judgment. They're using you as ammunition, but this isn't about you. It's about old men who can't handle a woman in a wheelchair making her own decisions. Tamsin, I know what you're going to say, that you should step back, make this easier for me. Don't, please don't." There was a long pause. "What do you need from me?" "Just be you." That's always been enough. After they hung up, Ronan sat in his apartment staring at his phone. Bridget was asleep. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of traffic outside. He thought about Tamsin, alone in that big penthouse, preparing to defend her company because she'd chosen to be with him. He made a decision. Friday morning, Ronan called in sick to work. He put on the dress pants he kept for occasions, like parent-teacher conferences, borrowed Connor's sport coat again, and drove across town to Innovate Tech headquarters. The security guard tried to stop him. "Sir, do you have an appointment?" "I'm here for the board meeting. I need to speak to the board about Ms. Aldridge." "That's not how this works." Fiona appeared in the lobby, her eyes widening when she saw him. "Ronan, what are you doing here?" "I need to address the board. They're making decisions based on me. I should at least defend myself." "That's not... You can't just walk into a board meeting." "Can't I?" "They're questioning Tamsin's judgment because of our relationship. I have a right to respond to that." Fiona studied him for a long moment, then made a decision. "Come with me." "But Tamsin is going to kill both of us." The boardroom was on the top floor, all glass and polished wood. Fiona led him to a small waiting area outside. Through the glass walls, he could see the meeting already in progress. 15 people around a massive table, Tamsin at the head, her expression composed but tense. "Wait here," Fiona said. "I'll tell her you're here." She slipped into the room, whispered something to Tamsin. Even from outside, Ronan could see Tamsin's shock, then her attempt to get him to leave. He shook his head, stayed put. Inside, the lead investor was presenting his case. Ms. Aldridge's recent personal decisions demonstrate a pattern of emotional rather than logical thinking. The loan to Mr. Garrett, the public relationship that's generated negative press, the distraction from core business functions, all of this suggests compromised judgment. Tamsin responded with her prepared arguments, but Ronan could see she was fighting an uphill battle. The investors had already made up their minds. They were just going through the motions. He stood up, walked to the boardroom door and opened it. The room went silent. 15 heads turned toward him. Tamsin's face showed equal parts fury and terror. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Ronan said, his voice steadier than he felt. "But if you're going to make decisions about Ms. Aldridge based on her relationship with me, I think I should have a chance to speak." The lead investor's face darkened. "This is a closed meeting. You need to leave in a minute. First, let me tell you what you're getting wrong." He pulled out his phone, brought up a photo of Bridget, set it on the table. "This is my daughter, 8 years old. Smart, funny, loves space and animals and asking questions I can't answer. 3 weeks ago, she had emergency surgery. Cost me $32,000 I didn't have. He had their attention now, whether they wanted to give it or not. I'm a construction worker. I make decent money, but I've got medical debt from my late wife's cancer treatment. I live paycheck to paycheck. When Bridget got sick, I didn't know how I was going to pay for it." He paused, meeting each board member's eyes in turn. "Ms. Aldridge offered to help, not as a gift, as a loan. Legal terms, fair interest, everything documented. She didn't have to do that. She chose to." "This is exactly what we're talking about," the investor interrupted. "Emotional decisions, personal entanglements. I'm not finished." Ronan's voice cut through the room, authority born from years of commanding work crews. "You want to talk about judgment? Let me tell you about hers. She saw someone struggling and offered help while respecting their dignity. She built a loan structure that was fair to both parties. She made sure I understood every term before signing. That's not emotional decision-making, that's compassionate business practice." He turned to address the full board. "You all sit here in your expensive suits, managing portfolios and making deals. But when's the last time any of you actually helped someone? When's the last time you saw a problem and fixed it instead of just profiting from it? The room was absolutely silent now. Ms. Aldridge built this company on the principle that technology should work for everyone. She lives that principle in her business and in her life. And if you can't see that, if you're so focused on appearances and propriety that you miss actual character, then you don't deserve to profit from her vision. He picked up his phone. Bridget's photo disappearing from the table.
That's all I came to say.
Good luck with your vote. He turned to leave, and Tamsin's voice stopped him. Wait. Tamsin stood, her expression unreadable. Wait, don't leave. Ronan stopped at the door, turning back. The entire board watched this exchange, silent and uncertain. He's right, Tamsin said, her voice carrying across the room. Everything he just said is right. And if you can't see that, then maybe I'm sitting at the wrong table. She wheeled to the front of the room, positioning herself so she faced the entire board. From her bag, she pulled out a worn folder, her original business plan from 10 years ago. This is what I presented to my first investor meeting. Before the accident, before Gerald died, before any of you knew my name. She opened it, showing pages covered in her handwriting, diagrams, projections. My vision hasn't changed. Accessible technology that works for everyone. Not as charity, not as a niche market, but as good business practice. She looked at each board member in turn. The accident didn't create that vision. It deepened it, gave me personal understanding of the problems I was trying to solve. But the core mission was always the same. The lead investor tried to interrupt. Ms. Aldridge, this isn't... I'm not finished. Her voice cut like steel. You claim my personal life is affecting my judgment. Let's examine that. This quarter, our revenue is up 18%. Our new product line has exceeded every projection. We've secured contracts with 3 major manufacturers. By every measurable standard, my leadership is effective. She pulled out her tablet, projecting financial data onto the screen. But you're not really concerned about performance, are you? You're concerned about optics, about what it looks like for a successful woman in a wheelchair to date a construction worker. About narratives you can't control, one of the older female board members spoke up. Tamsin, nobody's questioning your capability, aren't you? Because that's exactly what this vote is about. You're suggesting that my personal choices indicate professional incompetence. Would you make that argument if I were a man? If I'd married someone wealthy, would we be having this conversation? Silence. The answer hung unspoken in the air. Tamsin continued, her voice steady but passionate. Ronan and I have different backgrounds, different economic situations. But what he has is integrity, character, and the courage to stand in front of a room full of strangers and defend someone he loves. How many people in this room can say they'd do the same? She turned to the lead investor. You're worried about my judgment? Here's my judgment. I can buy out every hostile investor in this room. I have the personal resources to take this company private tomorrow if I choose. You came here thinking you had leverage, but you don't. The only leverage you ever had was my desire to build something collaborative, something bigger than myself. The investor's face had gone pale. Are you threatening us? I'm giving you a choice. Back my leadership, or I restructure this company in a way that removes you from the equation. I built Innovate Tech. I funded the first 3 years out of my own pocket. I recruited every key employee, designed every product, secured every major contract. This company exists because of my vision and my work. She paused, letting that sink in. But I chose to bring in investors because I believed in collaborative growth. I believed that diverse perspectives would make us stronger. If I was wrong about that, if you're more interested in controlling me than supporting the company, then I'll correct that mistake. The room was absolutely silent. Even the hostile investors seemed stunned. Ronan, still standing by the door, felt pride surge through him. This was Tamsin at her full power, brilliant, fierce, uncompromising. Not despite the wheelchair, not despite anything, just powerful. Another board member, a woman who'd been quiet until now, spoke up. Ms. Aldridge, I think some of us have lost sight of why we invested in this company in the first place. It wasn't just the profit potential. It was your vision, your leadership. I, for one, have no interest in a vote of no confidence. A few others murmured agreement. The tide was turning. The lead investor stood, his expression tight with controlled anger. "This isn't over. There are still concerns, then address them properly," Tamsin said. "Through official channels, with specific evidence of actual performance problems. But don't use my personal life as a weapon. That's beneath you, beneath this board, and beneath the company we've built together." She looked around the room one more time. "I'm calling for a vote right now. Those in favor of a no-confidence measure, raise your hands." 3 hands went up, the hostile investors who'd called this meeting. "Out of 15 board members, only 3. Motion fails," Tamsin said quietly. "This meeting is adjourned." The board members filed out, some stopping to apologize to Tamsin, others avoiding eye contact. When the room finally cleared, except for Tamsin, Ronan, and Fiona, the tension broke. "That was insane," Fiona said. "You actually threatened to buy them out." "I wasn't threatening. I was stating facts." Tamsin looked exhausted suddenly, the adrenaline draining away. Ronan crossed the room to her. "Are you okay?" "I will be." She took his hand. "You didn't have to do that." "Come here, speak to them." "Yes, I did. They were using me against you. I couldn't let that stand." "You were magnificent," she said softly. "Both of you were." Fiona cleared her throat. "I'm going to give you 2 a minute." "But Tamsin, the press is already calling. That speech is going to leak, and when it does, this becomes a very public story." "Let it leak," Tamsin said. "I'm done hiding, done apologizing for choosing happiness over convenience." After Fiona left, Ronan sat beside Tamsin, both of them processing what had just happened. "Did you mean it?" he asked. "About buying them out?" "Every word. I won't let anyone take this company from me, especially not for something as stupid as who I love." "You said who I love, not personal life or relationship. You said love." She smiled, tired but genuine. "I did, because that's what this is. I love you, Ronan, enough to fight a boardroom full of investors, enough to risk everything I've built. I love you too." He kissed her forehead. "But for the record, you didn't need me in there. You were doing fine on your own." "I was, but it was better with you there. Everything's better with you there." They sat together in the empty boardroom, the city spreading out below them through the massive windows. They'd fought for this relationship and won, not just today, but every day they chose each other despite the obstacles. "What happens now?" Ronan asked. "Now, we go forward, together. Whatever comes next, we face it together." "Together," he agreed. Outside, the media was already picking up the story. Photos from the board meeting would circulate. Comments would be made, but inside that boardroom, 2 people who'd found each other against the odds held on to each other and decided that was enough.